Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is a 2015 feminist gothic romance film directed by Guillermo del Toro and written by him and Matthew Robbins. The film stars Mia Wasikowska, Tom Hiddleston, Jessica Chastain, Charlie Hunnam, and Jim Beaver. The story, set in Victorian England, follows an aspiring writer who travels to a remote Gothic mansion in Cumberland, England, with her new husband and his sister. There, she must unravel the mystery behind the ghostly visions that haunt their new home. Crimson Peak premiered at Fantastic Fest on September 25, 2015, and was released in the United States on October 16, 2015, in both standard and IMAX formats. The film received generally positive reviews but underperformed at the box office, grossing $74 million worldwide. Plot. In 1887, in Buffalo, New York, American heiress Edith Cushing, daughter of wealthy businessman Carter Cushing, is visited by the ghost of her mother, who warns her, beware of Crimson Peak. In 1901, Edith, now a budding writer, meets English Baronet Sir Thomas Sharp and his sister, Lucille. Thomas seeks investors for his invention, an excavator to revitalize his family's clay mines, but Mr. Cushing rejects his proposal. Thomas enchants Edith, leading her father to hire a private detective who uncovers undesirable information about the Sharp brothers. Mr. Cushing bribes them to leave the United States, forcing Thomas to break Edith's heart by publicly disparaging her and her novel. Mr. Cushing is brutally murdered while shaving in the private club he belonged to, arousing the suspicions of Edith's childhood friend, Dr. Alan McMichael. Edith is called to examine her father at the morgue, and you can't help but feel affection and empathy for the young millionairess. This doesn't go unnoticed by Thomas. Thomas returns Edith's manuscript with a letter explaining his actions, and they reconcile. Thomas marries Edith, giving her a ring he took from Lucille, and they arrive at Allerdale Hall, the Sharp family's crumbling mansion in Cumberland, which is sinking into the red clay mine below. Lucille treats Edith to firethorn berry tea, and Thomas convinces her to invest her father's fortune in his machine. It's shocking to see the first images of the house, large, neglected, lonely, with large openings in the roof, and therefore very cold. You can even breathe the dry, cold air when you see these images. The pain Thomas feels when showing this to his young and beautiful wife is remarkable. It turns out Thomas was an inventor, and apparently a very good one. His project was to get his invention funded so he could get the red clay mine up and running again. This would help them get out of the current ruin they were in, because despite being a nobleman, they were bankrupt. In this regard, Thomas was sincere when he spoke, and he wasn't trying to scam anyone. He just needed them to trust his intellect. Edith begins to notice Thomas's absence from their shared bedroom at night. She suffers nightmares and is constantly visited by eerie red ghosts around Allerdale. One of them tricks her into opening a cupboard, where she discovers wax phonograph cylinders, before chasing her down to the cellars, where she finds a locked trunk with the name Enola engraved on it. Soon after, Thomas tells Edith that the estate is known as Crimson Peak, because of the warm clay from the mine that seeps from the ground and colors the winter snow, turning it a bright red. Thomas takes Edith to the local post office for some fresh air after Edith demands to leave, where she receives a letter addressed to E. Sharp. Trapped by the snow during the night, they finally have sex. Edith finally discovers the wonder of being a woman, of loving a man and giving everything for him, but this is not the same for her sister-in-law, as she gets furious the next day when they return, claiming that they made love. Edith replies that he is her husband and it is normal. With this, Lucille controls herself but her fury does not disappear. Edith steals a key inscribed, Enola, from Lucille and opens the trunk, where she finds a gramophone and secret documents. Using the gramophone to listen to the audio recordings on the wax cylinders and reading the documents, Edith discovers that Thomas was previously married to 3 other wealthy women, including Enola Chiati, the letter's recipient, and that Lucille has been poisoning her with tea as part of the brothers' marriage murder plot to finance Thomas's inventions. Edith confronts her husband and sister-in-law, catching them in an incestuous embrace, and is pushed off a balcony by Lucille. Although this discovery was not circumstantial, it was planned by Lucille, motivated by jealousy and revenge. Alan learned what Mr. Cushing had discovered about the Sharps, Thomas's multiple marriages and Lucille's time in a mental institution. He traveled to Allerdale Hall to rescue Edith, arriving just after she had been pushed. Nursing his wounds, Alan prepared to leave with Edith, but Lucille stabbed him and demanded Thomas finish the job. Thomas, however, inflicted a deliberate, non-fatal stab wound on Alan before hiding him in the cellar. Lucille forces Edith to sign a deed of transfer granting the Sharps ownership of her estate and confesses to having murdered Thomas's previous wives and having had a child with him, but who soon died. These are the ghosts that have appeared to Edith. Lucille admits to murdering Edith's father, as well as her own mother when she discovered Lucille and Thomas's sexual relationship. Edith stabs Lucille with her quill pen and flees, but Thomas, who is truly in love with her, confronts her. He burns the deed and begs his sister to join him and Edith in a new life together, but Lucille, enraged, stabs him to death. She chases Edith with the butcher knife she used to kill her mother, but Thomas's ghost stops her, allowing Edith to kill her with a shovel. Edith says a silent goodbye to Thomas before he disappears. Edith and Alan are rescued by the villagers, and Lucille becomes the ghost of Allerdale Hall, eternally playing the piano. Some time later, Edith writes a novel titled Crimson Peak. Comments. Del Toro calls Crimson Peak a gothic romance rather than a straightforward horror film. However, given how amorphous the horror category is as a formal matter, its designation ultimately undermines how it is marketed, which in turn shapes audience expectations of what a horror film should do well and how it should achieve those goals. The opening image is beautiful, but it also suggests something eerie to follow. A ghostly Edith Cushing stands in a blunt, snowy landscape, breathing heavily, and holding a knife. "Ghosts are real, I know this," she says aloud. Edith is a thoroughly modern woman who is ready to shake off the stupid dust of the Victorian era. An aspiring author, she shuns the love and expectations that high society has for women like her, until she meets Sir Thomas Sharp. The crime scene triggers Edith's retreat from the modernity around her to the crumbling old world of the Sharps and their Cumberland estate, Allerdale Hall. Her stormy marriage to Thomas takes place during an ellipsis following her father's funeral, during which another suitor, a rationalist doctor, can only gaze sadly at her from the other side of the grave. The house is truly a character in itself, with a giant hole in the roof allowing the house to breathe through its chimneys and blood-red clay bubbling beneath the floorboards. The house's gaudy extravagance and intricate designs simultaneously evoke feelings of unease and a desire to further explore the benefits of investing in art direction. The ghosts that haunt Allerdale Hall are equally striking, and also have a gruesome, giallo aesthetic, bright red, these skinless apparitions, and all the women appear in robes that appear to be in rigor mortis. Specifically, they're trying to draw Edith's attention to something that's been hidden in plain sight the entire movie. Thomas married her for her money, and he slept with her sister. Early on, while Edith visits her charming doctor, he shows off the spirit photography slides they purchased. Though we know these otherworldly images are fake, the pair sit in awe, chewing over the science of photography and death. Maybe we only see things when we need to, Edith wonders. In Crimson Peak, Del Toro shows us all about the film's underlying psychological drama, both literally and metaphorically. Reception. The film received mixed to positive reviews. It received a 73% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with a critical consensus stating, Crimson Peak offers entertaining, if somewhat light-hearted, fun fueled by a deliciously creepy atmosphere and director Guillermo del Toro's brilliant knack for unforgettable visions. IMDb audiences gave the film a score of 6.5 out of 10, and CinemaScore audiences gave it a B on an A+ to F scale. Benedict Cumberbatch and Emma Stone were originally cast to star in the film, but both dropped out of the production. Tom Hiddleston and Mia Wasikowska took over their roles, respectively. Symbolism. A timeless color scheme. Crimson Peak uses the three primary colors, yellow, blue, and red, to represent each of the film's three major forces, Edith, the Sharps, and violence/death, respectively. The primary colors are fundamental colors, meaning you can mix them to create other colors, but you can't mix just anything to create them. This is the classic complementary color scheme, so it immediately evokes a classic and timeless feeling. Our golden heroine. Edith is the golden heroine of our story, not only because of her personality but also because of her appearance. She wears almost exclusively yellows and creams, and even her hair is golden blonde. Yellow also represents her home in America, which brings her warmth, security, and familiarity. Typically, yellow is used to convey hope, happiness, and energy, but it's also a color that can be used to communicate visibility and caution. This fits perfectly with Edith's character trajectory, as she is a romantic optimist who constantly receives, and ignores, warnings from those close to her to stay away from the sharps. All of Edith's friends and family wear creams, browns, and yellows, and even the lighting has a distinctive warmth. Edith not only blends in here because it's where she belongs, but subconsciously, we're supposed to feel safe in this place, like Edith. In contrast, when Thomas and Lucille visit the United States, they often wear black, which enhances their strangeness and mystery. They always appear as dark shadows against the warmth of their surroundings. The Sharps and blue. Blue is the color of the Sharp brothers and Allerdale Hall itself. While they mostly wear black in America, upon returning home to Allerdale Hall they wear exclusively blue. Blue is typically used to communicate intelligence, sadness, and loyalty. The saying goes, true blue, after all, and Thomas and Lucille take loyalty to disturbing levels. It's also interesting to note that blue and yellow are opposites on the color wheel, reminding us once again that Edith and the Sharps are opposing forces. When Edith moves into Allerdale Hall, the main color palette changes completely. Instead of every shot being infused with warm yellows, everything is now cool blues. Even Edith herself wears a new coat with purple and blue details in her first outfit upon arriving at her new home, with only a hint of her yellow dress peeking out. However, after her initial arrival, Edith returns to wearing yellow dresses and her iconic cream nightgown every night as she wanders the hallways trying to understand the messages from her ghostly roommates. In contrast, the Sharps are also literally and metaphorically hidden in shadow. In some scenes, it's even difficult to see them under the blue moonlight. In fact, the blue used in Lucille and Thomas's clothing was matched with the blue paint used in the set of Allerdale Hall, a brilliant decision that underscores that both are part of the house and deeply intertwined with it and its history. The violence of red. Red is commonly associated with violence, death, and danger. In Crimson Peak, red appears whenever an object, person, or ghost is associated with death and violence. Red is also a color we often associate with love and romance, so its presence in Crimson Peak perfectly represents the Sharps' twisted love. The things we do for love like this are horrible, unhinged, filled with sweat and regret. This love burns you, mutilates you, and twists you inside and out. It's a monstrous love, and it turns us all into monsters. Red is also used as a tool of foreshadowing to warn us of impending danger throughout the story. When we first meet Lucille, she's wearing a crimson dress. This is the first time red appears in the film. Continuing with the color red, Edith's red wedding ring was acquired after the violent murder of Thomas and Lucille's mother. When Edith wears it, they are practically marked for death and are gradually poisoned by Lucille upon moving into Allerdale Hall. At the end of the film, Lucille rips the ring off Edith's finger and puts it on herself. When Edith first arrives at Allerdale Hall, we are greeted by a rusty red sign as they travel down the red clay road, a road of violence that literally leads to the house. The red clay itself, seeping from the house as if the living room were alive and bleeding, is a haunting image that brilliantly communicates the house's dark and violent history. All the terrible things that happened here can no longer be contained and are coming to the surface. The dog's rubber ball is red, and we later discover that it belonged to a previous wife and was left out in the cold with the intention of killing it. Lucille ends up committing the act during the film's climax. When Thomas and Lucille are revealed, along with the true nature of their relationship, we see that Lucille's room has red walls, and she puts a small red sash around her robe and nightgown before beginning her final murders. The most memorable use of red in Crimson Peak is in its gruesome ghostly inhabitants. Ghosts are a metaphor. The ghosts of Crimson Peak use their own color palette, white, black, and red. Each color represents the type of ghost they are and their primary motivations. Red represents violence, so the ghosts killed at Allerdale Hall, like Enola, are always red. Ghosts who are black are linked to a specific memory, place, time, etc. Something Edith explains to us in the final lines of the film. There are things that bind them to a place, like us. Some remain tied to a piece of land. A date and time. The shedding of blood. A terrible crime. But there are others. Others cling to an emotion. An impulse. A loss. Revenge. Or love. Those never go away. So ghosts like Edith's mother, who is forced to warn her about Crimson Peak, are black. Lucille, whose identity was shrouded in Allerdale Hall and who refused to leave, ended up being a black ghost. However, there is a white ghost. Thomas ended up becoming a white ghost because he is the only one not tied to any place or person. He apologized to Edith, let go of Allerdale Hall, and desperately wanted to put the past behind him and start his life over, no longer wanting to inflict pain and suffering. He eventually redeemed himself and wanted to change, so with her death, he set himself free. The best example I have of this masterful color map of Crimson Peak is this from canvas of the film. Each stripe represents the average color of each scene. You can see all the scenes of America very clearly in the first third, then the dramatic shift to Allerdale Hall, and even the flashbacks to America that pepper the film. That's all from me, goodbye.